Welcome to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching us on YouTube or if you're listening to us here on audio, wherever you get your podcasts, like, subscribe, download, share with your friends, your colleagues, your mother-in-law, everyone. My name is Caleb, and I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Ward and Jeff Amerine. How's it going, fellas?
It's going great. And I have to say, I appreciate the camera angle today. Because it's not the total profile. Why is the fat guy sitting on the end?
I was thinking, I feel the same way when it's straight on. I'm feeling the same,
it's like this way I can push up the table. And it's like,
I just did that as soon as you talked.
He really doesn't look as fat as he is.
This angle, you can just get my developing bald spot in front of y'all. So we are excited to have a friend of Startup Junkie on the podcast today. Our friend Jigesh Vora, founder and CEO of SwiftGo. How's it going?
Hi, how's it going? Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
We're glad to have you back in the NWA.
I know. I'm excited to be back. It's the right weather to be back too. Not that cold, right?
It's like 38 degrees out there today.
Yeah, you missed it.
It'll be better.
It was nice, 60s to 70s for
was it?
Over the weekend, Friday.
As long as it's not snowing up here.
We get a lot of the just kidding, it's not ready to be warm yet days this time of year. It's like, no, that was just a teaser. So nice.
Gotcha.
Give us the origin story, though. Start at the beginning. This is the part where you say, I was just a lonely sergeant in the Special Forces, and I realized after I was irradiated that I'd had spikes that came out of my hand, and I became part of X-Men. They call me Wolverine. That's what we're looking for.
I'm a Marvel fan, so it'll be a little bit of a different story. No. So on a day on April 1982, no, I'm just kidding.
Wow, you're so old.
Shouldn't have said that, should I? No. Essentially, the story is pretty simple. Everybody goes to grocery stores. I was getting there. More and more people were shopping online. This was about 7 years ago, when people were just starting to shop online a lot more. And inherently, you can see more and more people getting impatient in stores because they're used to, search for something, find it. And, I myself walk in a store when they, blur out discounts on the speakerphone. I used to get annoyed. It's like, man. And then thinking about it a little bit more, figured out that it's more because more and more people are shopping online. They're getting used to this experience. What's the issue? And then obviously after a lot more research and studies and this and that, found out that checkout lines in stores is a biggest problem. And it's been that way for quite a while. But nobody was motivated to do anything about it because there wasn't any other options.
Wasn't a choice, right?
Exactly.
For the longest time,
you got to do it. They actually utilize, especially retailers, utilize that because if you remember, they used to put magazines and some of
the impulse items.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the impulse items by the line because they want people to wait in line and pick some of that up. But obviously, with the online trend, that was going to change. It was a no-brainer at that point when you think about it, that 5-7 years down the line. People are not going to like that. So at that time, just decided to take the plunge. It was my third startup, so it wasn't a big, kind of a big decision because I had kind of wet my feet already with the first couple of times. This was the first full-time thing that I just decided, you know what, let's just do it. So that's how it essentially started.
But you spent some time, in addition to the startup background, you spent some time as a professional consultant too, right? You were within one of the big shops?
Yes, I was with one of the big fours. And obviously that gives you a different visibility into how the C-suite of the global companies think about it, how they're looking at things and kind of get an idea of the trends. So that obviously helps. That experience helps in deciding how I wanted to go about working at the solution and essentially the company.
Well, talk about how the SwiftGo application works. I think it'd be pretty interesting, and it's really pretty intuitive too how it will work. But talk about it.
Sure.
I know it's intuitive to use. It wasn't easy to build.
Oh, definitely.
I know it's a big problem.
As they say, right? Like simple is tough.
Right.
When you think about it, it's tough to build something that is simple, and it took us a while. This is a fourth iteration of our hardware. And about 8th or 9th iteration of the software to get there, where now it's a 3-screen thing. The way it would work from a customer journey perspective was we're white labeled mobile apps. So the customer would download whichever retailer's application, a mobile app, go into the store, scan a cart, which will essentially mean that, hey, I'm going to use this shopping cart, a physical cart for shopping.
QR code
on the cart. So you scan it, it syncs our app with the cart, and then you can start shopping, start scanning items, barcodes, and putting it in the cart, and essentially pay using the app and walk out. That's how simple it gets from a customer journey perspective, where you don't have to wait in lines. You don't have to, ask for where the items are. The app will tell you exactly where items on your shopping list are. If you have created a shopping list, you can search for items and it'll tell you what aisle numbers they're at. So we've tried to take the biggest pain points that customers have while shopping in supermarkets right now, and essentially tackling those via the app.
So, some of the audience is likely familiar with Scan and Go from Sam's Club. Contrast that. How are you different?
Well, obviously the UI UX would be quite a bit different, but more importantly, in Scan and Go currently, you still have to go after you scan items and put them, whether in your bag or cart or whatever, go to a particular place to pay, whether it's a Scan and Go counter or self-checkout counter or whatever that might be. And that essentially means you're going to still wait in line, right? So you are doing all the work of scanning things, but now you're still waiting in line. And that in our research initially, because we started with a Scan and Go sort of app. And we quickly learned that, one, from a customer perspective, that doesn't really solve the problem. And now they feel like they're doing the work and not solving the problem. And two, from a retailer perspective, they don't feel comfortable letting the customer just walk out without any checks, because there is a worry that even if nobody's trying to steal, by mistake, they picked up something that they did not pay for. So that's when we have the hardware version, which is essentially the check and balance system.
That hardware makes sure that it's only what's in there, and everything that's in there is accounted for.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you don't get that with Scan and Go. You still have somebody randomly scanning the
highlight.
Exactly. So from a retailer perspective, it's a huge issue because shrink tends to go up. And then from a customer perspective, you still have to go through the hassles of not being able to just walk out. So it doesn't.
You're going to build in a feature for California where if it's less than $900, you don't have to pay. you can just run out of that.
That'd be cool.
Anytime I get a chance to take a shot at California. Sorry, California. It's better
if that happens, I'm
it's
moving.
better in Arkansas. It's better in Arkansas. Come on.
If I'm getting $900 worth of free groceries every time, I'll go shop in California.
You think about that, right?
So tell me a little bit about like the potential for competition out there. Are there other folks that are doing something similar to this? I've heard about like the Amazon stores in like New York City where you walk in, walk out with stuff. Like, what does that look like, and how does that compare?
So we started the company before Amazon had announced any of that walk-in. Amazon Go was the first one that came out with the walk-in, walk-on technology. But obviously, because we were a startup, we were not getting as much traction with the retailers. But as soon as Amazon announced, everybody was like, oh my God, we got to do this. And the Amazon Go technology, which essentially is a bunch of cameras on the ceiling, and they visually track everybody that's within the store.
Weird.
That's expensive.
And that's weird. Like, I feel like it's like weird.
Well, they're doing a good job from an analysis perspective, but not only is it expensive, it's infrastructure heavy. It's essentially not scalable and practical when the retailer has a low margin to deal with. And they expect a better ROI. So we had looked at that solution before, and we had figured that, hey, card-based solutions are definitely more practical and cost-effective for retailer. And that's when we started looking at it. Now, also because the problem is that big, there are other smart card players that have come up after us as well, doing it a little bit differently. Most smart card players are actually getting their own smart cards, brand new smart cards. And again, because we've been in the market long enough, we had tried that and realized that a lot of these retailers are not only tied in long-term contracts with and relationships essentially with the existing cart manufacturers and suppliers, right? So it would be a difficult thing operationally to have brand new carts, not only space for charging equipment, the whole infrastructure that's needed, and deal with the whole contractual issues that come with it. So the way we designed our system and made it work was we retrofit into existing shopping carts. So it kind of, negates that roadblock as well from a execution perspective.
And cheaper for them, I'm sure.
And definitely a lot cheaper for everybody around.
How do you, the one thing that I've heard about shopping carts is one of those highly damaged assets that all the retailers have, and they're out in the rain and people abuse them and whatever. How have you accounted for that? I mean, how do you make the system durable enough that it's going to withstand the typical Walmart shopper that's got, their 450 pounds leaning on it or banging
Right.
Or they
into
leave it
stuff
out in the
or
wind, blows it out into traffic, or
Right.
maybe that's
And
an extreme.
that's what took the longest on the hardware side, right? So our team had to, not only that, but if you see a lot of self-checkout contests, so we use weight as a data point versus visual. I know there are a lot of companies that say, oh, visual works great. Having come from the technology side, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on there. It's a great buzzword, right? And especially because Amazon is doing it at a store level, it's easy to tap onto it and say, hey, we'll do it at a cart level as well. It's really difficult, and nobody, including Amazon Dashcart, is not doing that from a visual recognition perspective. They're still reading barcodes, right? So we use weight as a data point, and we keep it simple. Again, our goal is to make a cost-effective solution that can be implemented quickly. So you don't need to capture new data points, especially on the visual side, a bunch of pictures and angles for it to detect it. And as I said, visual, we can get into a whole tangent on it, but it doesn't work in a cart. Whoever is telling you that it works, it's, I would want to see it because it doesn't. But getting back to the point of durability, we had to spend a lot of time on the hardware side to check the durability. We have now IP67 rated enclosure is what we call it, that retrofits into existing carts. It's dust proof to a point. It's waterproof. It sits, the way it's designed is that it's pretty protected from the outside. So if somebody dashes the cart in and stuff, it doesn't get
lots
damaged.
of shake and bake standards. Yeah,
Exactly.
That makes sense.
And more than that, if you know the self-checkout, that's what I was trying to tell before, is that currently the self-checkout counters, the weighing scales don't work half the time. Most retailers have taken it out because that's the most frustrating part. It's like, hey, I'm going to go to self-checkout, but now I have to wait for somebody to come help me. So I'm spending longer time.
Yeah.
And we had to find the root cause analysis of it. And it's essentially a black box and, so to speak, trade secret, but we had to custom develop a few things that make sure that the weighing mechanism that we are using is durable enough and stable enough where that doesn't become
It doesn't
issue.
require frequent calibration.
Exactly. It doesn't require frequent calibration. It doesn't lose calibration quickly.
Sure.
Again, it's just durable. That'll take the, shake and bake, as you put it.
So the store, the operations folks in the store don't have to worry about a lot of headaches associated with maintaining it.
The Arkansas Inc. podcast provides an in-depth look at the latest industry trends in Arkansas from decision makers, business leaders, and executives. The Arkansas Inc. podcast has focused on a range of business and economic development topics, including small business and entrepreneurship, international business, fintech, workforce development, and community development. Each episode, which are about 30 minutes long, features business leaders and subject matter experts in conversation with knowledgeable members of the AEDC team. Recent guests have included Governor Asa Hutchinson, UAMS Chancellor Dr. Cam Patterson, Conductor Managing Director Dr. Jeff Standridge, and representatives from companies including Amazon, Walmart, IBM, Ozark Integrated Circuits, and more. The goal of the podcast is to help provide more information about Arkansas and its strong business environment to help business owners and executives make the decision to move to or expand in Arkansas. The Arkansas Inc. podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcast apps. Just search for Arkansas Inc. To learn more or subscribe to Arkansas Inc. podcast, visit arkansasedc.com/podcast.
Absolutely.
That's why. I mean, I can imagine if you were a store manager, it's like it's great until you have a bunch of failures and whatnot. But you built durability and reliability to where that's not an issue.
Right. And we went a step. So because talking to these maintenance guys, one of the other concern is infrastructure for charging, because now if it's a smart card, you don't need to charge it. How do you do that? So the way we have come up with the solution is that not only is our enclosure very less battery intensive, so we can last about 2 weeks versus some of the carts last a day, right? But we have tied up with the maintenance providers, with most of these big retailers. They'll do it as part of the maintenance cycle, so you don't need to install extra infrastructure within the store to kind of do battery management as well.
No, that's great.
So what do you think the adoption of the individual customer is going to be like, as far as getting over that, the technology piece for people that are, even with the self-checkouts, there are a number of people that refuse to do the self-checkout. There will always be those people. What do you think that adoption for this will be?
I'd never expect everybody to go at least right away to 100%, cart use. Like there are going to be checkout counters, cash registers, whatever you call it, because there's obviously a cash component as well, right? So we have a solution for the cash component, but there are going to be people who would want to go through checkout counters. The way we put it is that start with 80-20, right? Like convert maybe 10 to 20% of your shopping carts into smart carts. Feel it out. Let your customers get used to it. It's a normal adoption cycle for any technology, right? It's just that regular adoption cycle.
It's going to be the people that are already a little bit tech savvy, already using self-checkout, probably already using Scan and Go at Sam's Club, that will be your early adopters.
Right.
And then everybody else over time, the laggards and the Luddites will die off, and then you'll have a larger population of folks.
Exactly. And
Well, and then even as that portion adopts it, it's going to alleviate the strain on all the other cash registers just by having them, and then immediately starts, as that portion grows, it's going to spread those people out and just speed up the entire process, I feel like, of checking out.
Yep. And the good thing with carts is that now, as you guys know, the stores are more becoming fulfillment centers, right? Like a lot of people are starting to order curbside pickups, pick up and go. So it frees up space, because if you can take out one checkout counter out of the 10, that's still a decent amount of space that you're taking out and using. So which self-checkout doesn't give you, because I've heard a lot of talk about, hey, why don't we just replace cash registers with self-checkout counters so now you save on labor cost, which is true, absolutely. But there's this whole space issue and the customer experience issue that doesn't get solved with that. So, time will tell what the good next step is, but we're betting on the fact that smart carts will be much more user-friendly as well as cost-effective for a lot of these retailers.
When you're out talking to the retailers of varying sizes, what do you find the common objections to be when you roll it out? What kind of objections do you have to overcome as you're selling? Yeah,
so the biggest one is, will our customers get used to the mobile app adoption piece, right? And it's a good question, because over the past, we have seen mobile app adoption not take off as much. There are multiple reasons for it. If you do your research, one is the fact that, as I said previously, they still have to go wait in line. So why would I use mobile app if it's not solving the biggest problem that I have, is giving me the ability to walk out, right? So that wasn't there at that point. So that adoption hadn't taken off in some of those tests. So that's a big factor. But even other than that, what we have done is that we have said, okay, let's take it in a phase-by-phase approach. So what we are giving optionally to the retailers is that, forget mobile apps. We'll give you a tablet that will retrofit as part of our enclosure, so the users don't have to use a mobile app either. They can just use the tablet like, they're shopping and then walk out. And again, it's because it is now starting to take traction. Like any other industry, all all the major players were waiting for somebody to pick it up.
Right. It's a race to be second.
Exactly. And with Amazon, as they usually do, trying the Dash cart, and from what we hear, there'll be some cool other things coming now that they're deploying walkout technology in Whole Foods as well. A lot of these retailers are likely going to start opening up to trying these things and hopefully seeing the difference.
What has your strategy been around securing intellectual property with all this?
Oh, so because we were one of the very first players to start all of this stuff, we really have strong IP. And we have good IP plans in place to make sure that it's protected.
So you've got issued patents.
Yeah, we do have issued
great.
patents, absolutely.
And you were early in doing that. So
Yeah.
And for our clients and listeners who might put IP related issues on the back burner, how is that paid off for you to put that at the forefront?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm learning about it, right? Like, it's paid off from a strategy, just business decisions perspective, because it gives us the asset that we can now know how, obviously you validate with the right teams and stuff as to how strong they are and have strategy around it, but it gives you a good piece of asset to protect, and not only protect, in a way monetize your solution as well, right?
Sure.
So it definitely gives me on the business side a lot more confidence, and I wouldn't call it fallback plan, but at least a separate revenue plan as and when needed. But it's a long-term thing, right? So that's one thing, is that you can't just have IP and then expect, oh, you know what, I'm done with the company, right?
So
you have to build an operating company.
Exactly.
Because if you want that IP on a license basis to be worth anything, you have to have validation from people actually using it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
IP wasn't the first plan, is the point. Like, never keep IP as your first plan, but you should have IP. I would expect everybody to have some kind of IP, whether it's patents, copyrights, whatever, to protect what they're doing and hopefully get to monetize it.
Did you go after U.S. and international rights, or just U.S.?
We do have both in certain cases, but again, we have multiple different approaches.
You're building a thicket.
On the IP side, we have a completely separate plan where we have families of patents and we're building a proper portfolio.
That's great. Very cool.
Jigesh, something I'd be curious about is the story about how you found out about Fuel, initial thoughts around Tom and Taylor when you were interviewing with them, and then just your thoughts overall about NWA now that you've experienced it a bit and all that.
Shameless plug from the new Fuel program director
for our listeners.
Hey, make sure the questions you ask, or do you want me to just tell you all the good stuff or the bad stuff too?
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
That's fine. The whole thing.
I'm
We'll just drink a little more, James.
Context for our listeners: Fuel is our AI machine learning accelerator program that Startup Junkie facilitates, of which you were of the most recent cohort.
That's right.
Yes.
One of the select few. Do you think March Madness is tough? That's only 68 teams. This was like 5,000 applications, and you guys were in the top 10. So.
Oh, thank you. No, it was definitely a great experience. I would recommend it for anybody, especially within the AI ML arena. For us, well, I'll start with Tom and Taylor, right? So my first interaction was with Taylor. I got an email out of one of the, which I later, Taylor told me it was under his name, but it was a scout that had sent me an email. And it seemed interesting. Timing, as with anything, worked out pretty well. It was, I think, the final week of the review process. And I got that email. So I just reached out to Taylor saying, hey, tell me a little bit more about it and I'll tell you what we do. And given the fact that we are a retail tech company, Arkansas, with Walmart around, it just makes complete sense for us. And then from what Taylor explained, the fact that there is no equity taken, the fact that the amount of connections and network that some of the people involved in the accelerator have, it just became a no-brainer to join for us. So it's been very, very helpful for sure. And I would say, as I said, I would recommend it to anybody in the AI ML arena because some of the top players are in here. And just talking to them, will be very helpful. Whether you get a project for them or not is a different story. But just talking to them and learning more and fixing your product or pivoting or whatever is needed is very, very helpful. So the network helps for sure.
That's awesome. What do you think is the vision for SwiftGo in the next 2-3 years? Where do you want it to look like?
Get bought by Amazon, you think? Nah. No, kidding. I would not want to go anywhere close to that. But I think we can become the top player in smart cart market for the retailers. And as I said, more than just SwiftGo, I think in the next 3 years, you'll see, as you're already seeing, right? Like retail experience for the customer is changing, period. It's definitely digitizing, whether they'll mean a bunch of cameras around, screens around, all of that is happening. For supermarkets, we feel smart cart is the most cost-efficient way to get there and get that 80-20 rule, right? Like you get 80% of the customer and retailer benefit with 20% of the cost. So it becomes a no-brainer. So I just see that being adopted a lot more and us being the forefront of it. So it's interesting and exciting.
I love to hear that.
And another shameless plug, just for the region itself. It's interesting. We have podcast guests virtually that don't know much about the ecosystem. And so we're always championing Northwest Arkansas and the entrepreneurial ecosystem. The groundwork that's been laid here, you are spending a lot more time here. What's your perception of the region as an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and kind of what do you see your future in Northwest Arkansas? What does that look like?
Sure. Experience-wise, I have something to compare to, right? So that helps. I've been both around Houston, Austin. I lived in New York. So I've seen the startup ecosystems for both, all three cities, essentially. New York was already well-developed, but Austin and Houston I've seen grow up. So I think Northwest Arkansas is where I would say those cities were probably a few years ago, but at the pace which some of these ecosystems are building, I see that within the next year and a half, it would be one of the, unless I'm pretty sure numbers are coming out, where it can be one of the top places for any kind of technology startup to be. Right now, I'm sure there's retail and logistics that just, if you're a retail or logistics startup, I mean, there is no reason for you not to be in Northwest Arkansas, right? And given what I've seen with the amount of push being made towards the entrepreneurial community, as well as the infrastructure and resources that are being set around it, I think whoever enters now would be at the grounds level, and that's always a lot more beneficial and fun, quite honestly, to do that. So I myself am looking forward to doing that and being part of the community at that level and seeing how I can, I guess, not only benefit, but help as well.
Awesome.
On a more serious note, though, what's your favorite beer so far from Northwest Arkansas?
It's funny, it's a big craft beer thing, but I'm not a beer person. So I probably would not be the best bet for that. But,
That's fair.
Yeah.
Maybe just whiskey.
Our unofficial non-paid sponsor, Jameson. Thank you. Thank you, Jameson, for being an unofficial non-paying sponsor of the program.
Hopefully paying soon
Someday.
enough, right? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, this Jameson orange is pretty killer good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
We keep rolling out, whiskeys and bourbons out here every podcast. We're bound to get a sponsorship somewhere.
Yeah, you would think so.
Something else I'd be curious about, though, is with you being a serial entrepreneur, what's been the most exciting piece of running SwiftGo, and like what gets you out of bed and keeps you functioning with that?
Oh, that's a great question. A lot of people have asked me because we've been in business about 5 years now, right? And I've kept it, I call it bootstrap, but I personally have put in money. A few other people involved have put in some money themselves. So we're still founder funded is how I would like to put it. It's just building something and knowing, essentially, it's like you can see a trend. Now, we're not going to be 100% spot on, right? Like we understand we might be off in what we are predicting. But the exciting part is being able to pivot quickly and build things and be creative, and then in the future see those happen. I think that's the most exciting part. So yeah, it can be tiring at times. It can be, stressful at times, but it never gets frustrating, is how I put it. Because it's like our decision is our own. It's not the frustration that, oh my God, I have to do something where I don't believe in. No, I mean, if we don't believe in it, we'll change and we do something we believe in, or we are excited about. But the decision is ours. So that's the fun part.
And it's wonderful that you're trying to be at the forefront of innovation. And at the end of the day, it's really the consumer that's going to benefit and make everything much better and seamless. So I really admire that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, no, again, it's like when you see your first customer, or as I said, in our case, since we're B2B, the customer of our customer be happy or, just smile at the experience. I mean, it takes off years worth of hard work that you put in. So, yeah, it's exciting that way. Absolutely.
And with you primarily bootstrapping so far, has there been consideration with raising venture capital in the future, or just stick with what you're doing right now and just raise it more organically?
In the ideal world, I would raise it organically. I grew up in a family of businessmen, right? Have I considered raising money before? Yes. And I've seen some term sheets and the, things that go around it with it, and found that raising VC money is great for certain companies. In our particular case, because we were that early, and we knew that we were early in the market, right? Having talked to retailers, we could see it, but it was tough to kind of get them to see it. Probably not the best idea to go raise a VC fund, because then your clock starts ticking and everybody's under pressure now.
Treadmill.
Exactly.
Yep.
And they themselves are under pressure. So it's nothing against them.
No, it's just the
But
model.
hey,
It's
you
the
got to keep action going, right? Versus, okay, you believe in this, you've developed this, you keep it ready, and now wait for the market to catch up. It takes some patience. But once you raise VC funding, there are very few VCs essentially in the given startup market that go long, right? Yeah. So it becomes a very stressful situation for everybody involved. So in our particular case, it probably was best for us not to take in VC funding. And ideally, I would like to grow a fundamentally strong business where, if anything, I would sell it rather than take in VC funding and try to 100x it.
Happiest people I know are the founders that figured out a way to maintain 100% or near that amount of ownership in their business to the point of exit.
Yeah, and I think it's more creative that way too. Most businesses who are completely founder-owned are, essentially completely, because even if it's majority, most of the times there's a pressure of board of directors trying to dictate it because of different reasons, right? So most creative companies ideally are 100% founder-owned, where they really get to go look at the customer experience versus worry about, at least in the initial stages, right? Worry about how quickly can we 100x investment kind of stuff.
So one of the ways we like to land the plane is that this is a question we ask everybody is, you develop all this wisdom after 3 startups and working one in the big 4. This accumulation of a lot of knowledge. If you could take the knowledge you have today and go back to your younger self before doing those 3 startups, what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a very good question. I don't think I'm at a stage yet. I'll think of an answer and give you, but I don't think I'm at a stage yet where I should be thinking about that. I think there's still time for SwiftGo to succeed, or for me to think about that. But the one thing I would definitely pass on is, don't be stressed. I think it took me my 3rd startup to realize that when you believe in something, be okay with standing your ground, right? Be okay with taking the shot. And yeah, it might not work out, it might work out, but it's your shot, and go with what you feel. I think gut instinct is very, very important in entrepreneurs. And most good entrepreneurs, if you look back, their gut instinct is what drives them, and they're right majority of the times, right? So it's important to trust yourself, because I've had things that I knew were going to happen 5 years down. I told people, nobody believed it, and they did happen, right? So that's how I learned how to trust your gut, to just go at it, because there's something that you can see. Just believe in yourself.
Well, and to your point, it's not foolish risk taking. It's, we spend a lot of time developing models to do AI and machine learning. The neural network that you develop based on that accumulated knowledge allows you to have intuition, not backed up by necessarily empirical data from a third party, that gives you insights that others might not have. And that's true. I mean, most of the good entrepreneurs I know, even those that are data driven, there's an element of judgment and gut instinct that's integral to the way they look at problem solving and market trends.
Yep, no, absolutely. I'm glad you said that. And I'm probably and most entrepreneurs I know are probably very, very risk averse, right? Like none of us are gamblers.
It's qualified risk.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
it's essentially, the term calculated risk, I think Bill Gates made it famous years ago. It makes sense, but it's not even that. It's like, you are confident that this is going to work. You're betting on yourself. So in your head, it's not risky at all, because you see it happening, right? So it's like, I think, and most entrepreneurs are that way. I think if you're not that way, you will probably succumb under stress or frustration, because if you truly don't believe that what you're doing is right and there's no risk involved, at some point you're going to give up, or at some point you are going to start doubting yourself and not believe in yourself. And that's tough. Even with all the doubt as part of the entrepreneurial journey, you like something within you tells you that this is happening. It's
akin to something in the military, in the special operator community. They call the combat edge. And it's that there's this internal belief based on all your training and all your experience that it's going to work out, and that you're going to make it. And you can push yourself really far into a pain cave, which is true of entrepreneurship. Right. And when you lose that combat edge and you give in to self-doubt, that's when things begin to go the other way. Yep. It's really true. And it's not hubris or overconfidence. It's just having that edge that says, I know I'm going to do the right things. I know I'm going to build the right team. It's going to work out.
Yep.
And it matters. Well, that's interesting to hear you say that. Because a lot of people say, well, I don't make any decisions that aren't backed up by data, yada, yada. It's like, okay, that's great. And that you need to have good data, but I think intuition and judgment's a big part of it.
And I think intuition and judgment are driven by data, for sure, right? Like you need to have, you can't literally just stay with your blinders on saying, oh, I believe this and I know it's right. No, it's data driven for sure. But ultimately it is your intuition, because it depends on how you see that data. Right?
Exactly.
Not everybody sees the same data. I mean, nowadays, especially with the amount of information out, I can get data to tell any story in any which way whatsoever, right? Like you can. It doesn't matter. So it really is based on your judgment on how you interpret the data and how confident you feel.
I'm looking at you, man. Time to completely land
the last question. All right, Jigesh. So if our listeners who are in 100 plus countries want to know more about you, SwiftGo, want to connect with you, or any of those things, if they want to bring SwiftGo in for a demo in their retailer, how do they get in touch with you? Where do they learn more?
Sure. They can reach out directly to me at jigesh@swiftgo.com, or they can just reach out to info@swiftgo.com. Go to our website. There's a form. Fill that out. We'll be happy to connect and talk about anything, pretty much. Anything AI, ML, technology related. I was like, hey, if you want to talk about Jameson, Orange, happy to connect and talk about it.
Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
It's great catching up.
Appreciate you guys.
Great to see you guys again.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.